Just a little shout out it takes a village to go on a student trip. So I want to thank my colleagues for putting up with our absences, our OAs who do all that hard, difficult travel paperwork, our deans and CAB, and the college that supports the student travel. A lot of times we get funds to do this. Brenda Barry Schomer, who has been doing my car requests for 20-some years, and she's been doing that since 1978. And I have to say, we've never broken down on the road, and we've done thousands and thousands of miles. So thanks to the people who do that. And then thanks to my dad, who's sitting right there, because he put the travel bug in me. We like to go on road trips. So. And so I've got a lot of slides, so I'll try and get through them so you're not here all night. And I like to make students do goofy things in front of signs. I love signs, and so I take lots of pictures in front of the signs. But first, some rationalization for using our eyeballs and visual stimuli. That yes, almost 50% of our brain is involved in visual processing. So that's really important for our brains, and that how much of that we use to look at things. These stats are from a company that does visual strategy for very large corporations, so it's important. Yes, 40% of all our nerve fibers are connected in the brain are connected to our retinas, so that's a big part of how we operate. We need that visual work. And more of our neurons are dedicated to vision than the other 4 senses combined. So our vision is really important. It kind of bums me out that they say we're losing our sense of smell because we're using so much of those neurons for other stuff. So maybe we can rekindle that. And just moving around, seeing, doing, that really is important for learning, and I think that helps people remember things, and helps us really become lifelong learners and get those skills. So my kind of theory about traveling is it's important to show the possibilities so the students know what is possible. I feel like if they see people out there being an artist and hearing from them, talking to them, doing museum work, exhibits, doing graphic design, advertising, if they hear from these professionals and see them in their space, they can maybe visualize themselves doing that as well. One of those goofy sign pictures, this is on the way to the Spiral Jetty when we go to Utah. It used to be Thiokol Rocket Corp. They make rockets out here in the Utah desert in this secret place. And they had this great billboard, and I made them all get out and take this picture, igniting the future. Are you in there, Kevin? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I think that's what we're doing, is we're igniting the future. The very first trip I ever took was in 2005, and it was just to Omaha. I was kind of testing out the waters, and I had just started teaching here, and I wanted to find out what graphic design and advertising professionals were doing. And I found this guy named Drew Davies. He's the guy up there on the right, and he was this award-winning designer in Omaha. He had judged the Communication Arts Annual, which is our big industry magazine. And so I just emailed him and I said, hey, I'm out here at Chadron State. I'm teaching graphic design. Would you want to come talk to students? And he said, that's a long ways. That would be 2 days travel. But if you ever come to Omaha, I would be happy to give you a tour. So I took him up on that. And that's him talking to 3 of our students, Nikki and Becky and Jenny. And then he also got us into Bailey Lowerman, which is probably the most creative and prestigious ad agency in Nebraska. And they have a lot of national accounts. So that was, great to see that. And I could kind of pick their brains and see what was going on out there. So that kind of got me into the American Advertising Federation crew. It used to be just Omaha, now it's AAF Nebraska. And they put on a really fabulous conference every year called Meet the Pros. And they get all these professionals in the Omaha, Lincoln area and to come do sessions. They even get nationally known designers, illustrators, marketers, digital people to come talk. And so I figured out ways to, and again, you know, the administration would help pay for some of this, to take students to these conferences so they could see and hear these professionals. They also have a portfolio review, so they could look at students' portfolios. And it's just been a really fantastic experience. And I learn a lot too. Learn about, you know, interviewing tips. I can share that with other students. And so it's been really great. And the most recent one there is on the bottom, and I think Saul's here. He went to this year's. So yeah, we've had a great time and learned so much there. And the Black Hills also has a AAF chapter, and it's a little smaller. And the one in Omaha, there's been 200 students that come to that from UNL, UNK. It's really big in the whole region. This one's nice. You know, it's Black Hills State. It's us. It's one of those colleges on the reservation. So it's been really good. And our students have won awards with the Black Hills AAF. And they also brought in Aaron Draplin, who's that big furry guy in the middle up there, and then in the middle down here. And he did workshops. He's this hugely famous, nationally known designer. He does stickers and t-shirts, and he does album covers for Chris Stapleton. And so he gets with the students and he does workshops with us. He gave us like free merch, just a great guy. And I'm kind of thinking that Riley Ellis there, he's our graphic design person for CSC now. I think he kind of got ignited with Draplin and got excited about things. So that was a great experience, and he's just a great guy. So for them to be able to meet somebody like that and interact is really cool. So then Richard Bird kind of gave me Art Guild to take care of when my second year here. And so previous, I think Vince Hazen was the sponsor, and they would go to Santa Fe, I think mostly. So I started out just going to Denver for the first time, and we just had 3 students. And I still keep in touch with these a lot of these students I keep in touch with. Thank goodness for Facebook. That's been a great way to keep track and see what people are up to and hear from them. So our first trip, we went to Denver, not very far. And the Denver Art Museum was fairly new, and it's a really radical design. It looks like mountains. You can't miss it in the Denver skyline if you can see it. It was done by this famous architect, Daniel Libeskind. And they had a little bit of an issue. So big dreams, and it used to snow in Denver, and the snow would kind of slide off where you go in the entrance there. And so it was fenced off at that time, but I think maybe that'll change. But Denver Art Museum has a wonderful collection, Monets, all kinds of great stuff there, and I can go there all the time. And a lot of museums will have different shows that revolve. So yeah, that was our first trip. Second trip, we went to Minneapolis. That was a long drive. And I have friends from college that I've kept in touch with, which I hope is another good example for students, that you keep in touch with these people you're in school with. And then later on, the gal in the back there with the glasses, the tall gal, and in the middle there, that's my friend from advertising class, Peggy Zita, and she lives in Minneapolis. And she worked at an agency there and then went off on her own freelance, but she had all these connections. So she hosted us for a brunch, and then she got us into this agency, Periscope. They had the Target account. So it was great. And then, yes, the Minneapolis Institute of Art, there's a Picasso, and there's, I think, a Kang Sutan behind the gals there. So seeing real art in person and seeing the size, that's, I think, always important too. Next was like a really big trip. So this was my first longer trip, and we went to Utah, back to my old stomping grounds. So first we went to Logan. That's where I lived for many, many years and went to college there. And Bob Bislin is another award-winning designer, and that's his work behind him there. And so the students got to meet him, and he took us out for lunch and got to see what he does. We went to the Utah State campus and the Nora Eccles Harrison Museum of Art. And I worked there as an undergrad and a graduate student. Loved working at the museum. And in the middle of our students there is Vicki Rowe. She was another friend of mine from graduate school and college, and she was director at the time. So she was the director of the museum. So they could get kind of an inside look at that. And then we went to Salt Lake City. And interesting story about Richter 7, Scott Rockwood. He had offered me an internship when I was graduating with my undergrad degree in Salt Lake City. He worked for another agency then, and I was going to take it. Problem was, it didn't pay anything. And my fiance and I moved to Salt Lake. We managed to rent a place. But he was just going to make minimum wage at a ski area, and I wasn't going to get paid for a while. And I thought, and he ended up getting a job in Oregon with the Forest Service. So we thought, that's the better paying job. So we took that. But I contacted Scott Rockwood years and years later. At this time, I don't think he remembered me, but I told him the story. And he said, yeah, come and, I'll give you a tour. I'll talk to you guys. So I thought that was really neat. And we went up to Park City and they got to see, there's lots of galleries in Park City. They saw an artist working in a gallery. Sandy Broomvon is another friend that I had, and she took us into her studio and showed us her work. So lots of cool stuff. And we got to have a little fun. So, and food. The Pie Pizzeria, highly recommended in Salt Lake near the University of Utah campus. Famous Aggie ice cream at Utah State. They make ice cream there, so we had to, of course, stop there. We saw the Winter Torch at the Salt Lake, at the stadium there, and it was Nikki's birthday. So yeah, then we had a little more fun. We drove down to Moab, and we went to the national parks down there. And at this time, you could just drive in. There wasn't reservations or lines or anything. And they got to see these places. And for me, this was great to share this because this was what I did for my spring breaks when I was in college, and for them to get to see this. So yeah, we did a little hiking. They got to see Delicate Arch. We hiked there. That's a huge piece of nature art and also subject matter a lot of times for art. Next trip was in 2010, and that was to Santa Fe. And Santa Fe is amazing place. So many galleries and art there. It's the oldest. I got to get my facts here. It's the oldest city in our country. Let me see here. And established in 1610. And 13 years before the Plymouth Colony. And Palace of the Governors is the oldest public building in continued use in the country. So it's got lots of history and a whole lot of art. And one of my favorite artists is Georgia O'Keeffe. I just had a student contact me and said she saw Georgia O'Keeffe somewhere and reminded her of me, and so she got a hold of me. So that was kind of neat. So yeah, we went, did I skip one here? No, okay. And I like to get out and get the students walking around too and see the landscape and the environment. So Bandelier National Monument in New Mexico is a really amazing place that you can actually climb around. There's kind of like cliff dwellings. And this is one of the few places where you're allowed to get inside and look around. In art appreciation class, we talk about Maria Martinez and creating beautiful, functional pieces and in a whole new style. And she was a San Ildefonso Pueblo potter. Bandolier, this Frijoles Canyon is where her ancestors were from and lived. And so you can see one of her pots in the visitor center. We went to Taos as well and stayed there a night, and the Mabel Dodge Lujan House, this very historic place that many people, famous people have stayed in. They got to see that. This shrine on the way, Chimayo, is this beautiful little church, and funny story, so it has a room off to the side, and it's known for its sacred dirt. So people go there and they get a little container of dirt that's supposed to be miraculous. And so we go in the little room and, and there's crutches all over the walls where people have come back and were healed. And there's a little hole in the ground and, that's where you get the dirt out of. Well, while we're there, some guy comes in from outside and he dumps dirt in the hole. So it's like, okay. Because if people kept digging, then it would, be a big hole. But kind of a funny story there. So and beautiful art, carved wooden altarpieces and painted in the retablo style. Taos has the Harvard Museum of Art, and Taos became an artist colony early 1900s. There were several artists that came there to visit, and they saw how beautiful it was, and they stayed. And so the Taos Society of Artists formed there. There's this Inger Jerby gallery, and they got to talk to her. She was quite fun and beautiful work, and I noticed she's still there. She still has a gallery there. So to talk to a real artist and see her gallery and how that works. So the next year we went back to Santa Fe again, and this time we also went to Albuquerque, and that person on the right there in the silkscreen room is Richard Byrd's brother. So Richard set us up to visit with his brother who had a silkscreening business, and they got the big tour and looked, at the whole process and got to see that. And then I discovered these sculptures by Nora Naranjo Morse. We see a movie in art appreciation, Inspiration, and she's one of the artists that talks about what inspires her, so I was pretty excited to see that. And I like to show students this stuff in real life when I stumble on it. More Santa Fe, the galleries there, all over. There's all these little galleries, beautiful, expensive art. There's also the Chuck Jones Gallery, and he's got galleries all over the place, I think. But you could see the original drawings from some of the Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and all these great cartoons that we grew up with. So that's always neat to see kind of that process. And let me see, Josh up there, the tall guy on the left, I noticed he's doing paintings and I think he's getting them in galleries right now. So that's pretty cool to see. And Jean and Andrea, the two girls on the right, messaged me and said, yeah, those are art guild trips. We learned so much, such good memories. So that was good to hear. Okay, let me see if I can get this to go forward. Maybe not. I'll try this. Okay. Kelsey was on that trip too, and I kind of put out a call. I said, hey, students, if you went on a trip with me, can you tell me something you remembered from that trip? And Kelsey took the time to do a really lovely email and talk about that Santa Fe trip, and she saw this work in a gallery, and it was these folded forms, and that inspired her for the rest of her career. She's still thinking about that. And this idea that taking those trips in your formative years, when you're young, when you're looking at stuff, when the future's wide open, I'm glad to hear that really was helpful and it sticks with people. So It was great to hear that. She went on and got a master's in design and visual communication at Arizona State. And then she worked for Arizona State as a designer as well. And I think now she's in Portland, Oregon. What's going on here? Okay, there we go. So, yeah, always going to Bandelier when we go to Santa Fe, and there's some more views of it. It's a long canyon, and there's, like I said, all these like dwellings that you could climb up into along there and get a feel for the environment. We went to Minneapolis again, and the Minneapolis Institute of Art has a wonderful art collection. There's Jean and Tim Hoff, and there's a Van Gogh and Pizarro maybe on the right there. So again, being able to see this work in person is really good for us. This is the Wiseman, that's another museum in Minneapolis, and there's a Roy Lichtenstein, very large pop art. He was a pop art guy, and that large painting. And again, these are artists we talk about in class, so to be able to see these is really wonderful. I threw in June Kaneko there. He's a ceramic artist, and he's actually based in Omaha. And when we go to meet the pros, we used to go to my friend Rob's, he works at Omaha Clay Works, and it was a studio space in the old market in Omaha. And we would go visit him, and he'd show us around. Well, that closed down. He's now in the Hot Shops. That's another place. But the place that he was in is become a ramen noodle restaurant. And we go there, but that's where June Kaneko's kiln was originally, and you could drive a Volkswagen into it. It was so large. So these are really large ceramic pieces that June Kaneko creates, and he's internationally known. So yeah, kind of fun to see one of those. Another piece we saw at the Wiseman is, so for students to see different kinds of art that isn't just painting, drawing, photography, printmaking, two-dimensional, and sculpture, but something that's interactive that you walk into. This was a really fascinating piece where you walk down that hallway. It's in the museum, and it's a built thing, and it looks just like a really run-down, dingy apartment building. And as you walk by those doors, you can hear people in there, like somebody's having a fight and somebody else is crying. And so it's this life drama that you hear through these doors as you walk down that space. And so I think that was a neat thing for students to see. Went to another design advertising firm, Olson. Got a tour, got to see what they do. The Minneapolis Sculpture Garden at the Walker Art Center. There's a large piece by Claes Oldenburg and his wife, Kuzi van Bruggen. And you can spot Claes Oldenburg stuff pretty quickly. He takes ordinary objects and makes them really big. There's one at the Denver Art Museum if you haven't seen it. So to see that and understand who and what they do. We took a trip to Kansas City, Missouri in 2014. That was kind of a first. And this is the Mid-America Arts Alliance, and they're a group that organizes traveling exhibits. They talk to the guy that does the framing and matting. The organization, it's a nonprofit and spreading art and exhibits throughout the Midwest. And I have to thank, she's not in this picture, Sarah Pollock. So she was I'll get to her when we see a picture of her. Nelson Atkins Museum is a big museum in Kansas City, huge, wonderful collection. These are just a few of the things you can see there. The students like to play with what they're seeing there, and see the famous artists. Another Roy Lichtenstein. Andy Warhol. Romare Bearden is a African-American artist who did kind of collage work. We talk about him in class. And then we toured the Kansas City Art Institute, so that was nice to see what fellow art students were doing. There's a famous Louise Bourgeois spider sculpture. She's a internationally known sculptor and does spiders. And there's one at the Denver Art Museum as well. We toured Hallmark cards. So Hallmark, they hire artists, they hire illustrators. My college roommate was hired there out of college to be an illustrator. And they got to watch a artist, craftsperson kind of at work. They have somebody scheduled for tours that will be working, and you can see what they're doing. So another way for students to see and do art for a living. So Sarah Pollock's there in kind of the front, the second from that side. She was the Sandoz director here for many years, and she had a degree in museum studies. She taught some of our museum studies class, and she had really great connections to museum people. So she got us in to see this Traub Design Associates. They do exhibit design, and we got behind the scenes tour and got to see how they make exhibits for historical museums, art museums, all kinds of different museums, and how that works. And then she knew this CSC grad, Alexis, who works as a historical reenactor at this stagecoach stop site in Kansas there. And students got to ride in a stagecoach and go through the interior of the building and see how, the period pieces. And then we went to Salt Lake City again, 2015. And yeah, if there's students from these trips, yeah, feel free to comment or say, remember something. And again, I kind of leaned on college friends. So my grad school friend, Karen Krieger, is the one on the right there. And she was the director of the Salt Lake City Art Council at this time. So she talked about what you do with that. They put on concerts. They put on arts events in the city. And Utah has good arts organizations. They have the Salt Lake City Arts Council. They have the Utah Arts Council. And so a lot happening there. We visited the Utah Arts Council office, and the gal standing in the back there is Alyssa. She was another friend from graduate school, so she took us in and showed us around, talked about what arts councils do, what kind of jobs are available, what programs they promote and help with. Traditional and folk arts, so this was another Utah Arts Council building, and these are quilting, things that different ethnic groups do, and so that's another outlet for artists. We also went to the Utah Museum of Fine Arts on the University of Utah campus, and the Marriott Library on the University of Utah campus, and way in the back there with the red shirt is another friend, Amy, who was a librarian here. And she scheduled us with their bookmaking studio. They still have metal type that they use, so the students got to see what that was all about and that process. That drawing, I think it's a print there by Luis Jimenez. He's the artist who did the big blue horse at the Denver airport, if you've seen that. And maybe you know the story. So it's a huge fiberglass piece, and as he was working on it, part of it fell on him and killed him. So yeah, one of my shuttle drivers one time, the eyes light up red at night, and one of the shuttle drivers said, that horse is possessed, and maybe it is, I don't know. But so yeah, so his family finished the sculpture for him, but he was he had a tradition from his father of kind of car painting and enamel, and so his work is a lot like that. We got in and saw another design ad media firm in Salt Lake City called Struck, and so again, doing these tours, hearing from professionals, and like I said, I hope they imagine themselves in that. We went to the Spiral Jetty, but that's way in kind of the hinterlands of northern Utah, and in order to get there, you have to go by the Golden Spike National Monument. So I had to stop there. and they have to see where that last spike in the Transcontinental Railroad happened. And in Park City, we saw if you've heard of Banksy, he's an artist that is, quote, anonymous, and he does these sort of activist, nice graffiti things all over the world. And nobody knew who he was, but I heard recently he just got caught, and they know who he is now. And he was actually arrested several years back, and they didn't realize who they had. So, yeah, but kind of, it's great to see that sort of thing. Oh, did you find the other? What was it?
It was a little girl.
A little girl?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I missed that.
Flower, I think it was.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, to see that stuff, and yeah, to see some of this historical stuff. So the Spiral Jetty is probably the most famous land art piece in the world, and it's in the northern end of the Great Salt Lake. And this is our trip to see it. This was the first time we went to see it in 2015. And you can see it. So when I was in college in the 80s, it was completely covered in water. The Salt Lake, they actually talked about pumps in Salt Lake City because of so much water. And it was covered, you could not see the Spiral Jetty at all. And at this point, it's pretty, dried up. And the Salt Lake is actually drying up. And we went back in 2024, and you'll see, you can kind of see a difference. So when we get to that. So yeah, and this was a really cool experience, I think, for all of us, and to walk that. So Robert Smithson was one of these earth artists in the 1960s and 70s, taking art out of the galleries, and also wanting to show the change of time in the environment, and this is a great example of that. We took a trip in 2016 just to Boulder and Denver and threw something new, the Celestial Seasonings Tea Factory. And inside their kind of cafe, they had the illustrations from their tea boxes, and they had who the artists were. So that was interesting to see who these people were that were doing these wonderful illustrations. And we toured the tea factory, and the mint room has its own room because it's so strong. That was something we learned. And also in Boulder, which sadly is not there anymore, was the Leaning Tree Museum. So Leaning Tree are those fun cowboy cards that you get at Baumgar's. And the owner of Leaning Tree had a huge Western art collection. And so we got to see that. That's kind of the inside view there, sculptures, beautiful paintings. And I went to look for it again a few years later, and it was gone. So he was 90 years old, and he decided he needed to disperse the work, and so they auctioned it off in 2018. But that was a neat thing in Boulder, and kind of surprising to see that. The Denver Art Museum, again, always a great place to go. Namjoon Pak is an artist. He was one of the earliest artists to utilize video, and he does these great things where you, like a Buddha looking at a TV screen, and you've got a video camera on it, and there's this interplay between technology and old things and ideas, and so seeing that. Robert Henry is an important figure, especially for Nebraska, and his original last name was Kozad. So I'm gonna get to that in a minute. But yeah, there's a Robert Henry in Denver. There's one in Santa Fe. He's all over the place. This is the Kirkland Museum of Fine Art in Denver, and I would highly recommend this too. Vance Kirkland was an artist and teacher in Denver. He had this beautiful brick studio home, and at some point, and he did work, and he collected stuff, and the Kirkland has these rooms of like decades of design, like that top one there is Art Deco. They've got Art Nouveau, they've got contemporary, 50s, 60s. And so you can walk through these decades of furniture and tables and plates and all kinds of things that evoke that. And then you can see his work. So he's got this really interesting dot work that he did. And they actually moved his brick house studio several blocks, and now it's not just down from the Denver Art Museum, so you can walk between these. And he would hang himself, he would suspend himself over his paintings, and he had his canvases on a skateboard, and he would move the paintings so he could put his dots down, and really interesting character. So yeah, and Sarah set us up with a CSC alum there who was a docent, and they got to talk to her, and she gave us a little tour, so that was nice. And then Sarah also got us set up at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, and we got a personal tour and got to talk to exhibit graphic designers to see how they do this, what the process is, and hear from them. It was the thing that they had worked on was a chocolate exhibit. So how is chocolate made? Where does it come from? They even made a little Swiss chocolate store for their exhibit. Back to Santa Fe, and Sarah got us set up with a whole bunch of really great people to give us the insight on all these museums. There's a place in Santa Fe called Museum Hill, and there's several museums there, and one of them is the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture. And we had a tour with this Dina, who was Hickory Apache, and she could give us a different perspective on things. So Museum of International Folk Art is also on Museum Hill, and we had a tour there, and all of these different kinds of ethnic art and beautiful flamenco dresses, and she took us down in the basement, and we saw where they store and how they store these artifacts. We talked to a graphic designer. They had a tramp art exhibit, and tramps making guitars out of cigar boxes and the decorative parts. So seeing that in the folk art museum. And then we had a roundtable discussion with the director of marketing and outreach for cultural affairs in New Mexico, and they have a magazine, and she talked about how that works. And this is the beginnings of the CSC labyrinth here. So on Museum Hill was a labyrinth in the bricks, and I watched the students do this, and get really, same thing at the Spiral Jetty. It's pretty amazing to watch how they get really engaged in that. And so that kind of stuck with me for a while after this. But yeah, that's an actual labyrinth path. And supposedly in the middle, it sounds different or something, but neat to watch them engage with that. We went to the New Mexico Museum of Art, had another tour with somebody there who was, visitor experience and how to educate in museums. And there is a Robert Henry painting, another one. So the story with Robert Henry is his original last name was Kozad, and he and his family moved to, it was the Nebraska territory, and he and his family moved to the Kozad area before it was Kozad. And his dad bought up a bunch of land and then tried to sell and get people to move there. And his dad was kind of, I think, a shyster a little bit. And so he got in a fight with some of the ranchers in the area. I think somehow somebody got shot, and it wasn't Robert Henry's dad. So the area folks were pretty upset. So the Kozad family had to leave. They left town. They went to Denver. They all changed their names. But that's who Kozad is named after, is Robert Henry's father. And so there's a house there where they lived in, and you can tour it, and they have a little museum behind that you can see his work, Robert Henry's work. And he went on to become a very important and famous painter in the American, in our country. He founded the Ashcan School in New York City, And meaning they were painting things that were realistic. They were painting life as they saw it. They were painting the slum in the streets and the hard things. And so he was a fantastic teacher, taught at the Art Students League for several years. And so, yeah, that's a neat connection to Nebraska and where Cozad got its name there. This is a really interesting story. So Sarah got us in to see this conservationist at the Palace of the Governors. And the Palace of the Governors is, yes, the oldest continuous public used building. As I mentioned, Santa Fe was established in 1610. And these hides were painted, and they're from the late 1600s, I think. And one of them is depicts a battle that was in Nebraska at the where the Loup and the Platte rivers converge, and it was the Oto and the Paiutes fighting and routed the Spanish troops in 1720. So they actually have an illustration of that on one of these hides, and he was photographing them and talked about that conservation process. Always, you go to Georgia O'Keeffe's Museum when you go to Santa Fe. So we had a tour with their communications manager, and she kind of talked about what she does, and then told us about the work. And yeah, always back to Bandelier National Monument, and to play and climb around and see the environment that influenced a lot of these artists. And funny story about on the lower right-hand corner there, that's the Rancho de Taos Church. Ansel Adams photographed that numerous times. Georgia O'Keeffe painted it. Several people painted it. And we were headed back through Taos to get back home. And we're stopped at a stop sign. And I just looked to my right, and there's the church. And I'm like, freaking out, and the students don't really know what I'm up to, and I'm like, there it is. And so, yeah, I had to take a picture of it, but I had never visited. I wasn't sure where it was at, but I looked out the car window, and there it was. So, but yeah, a very famous church that's photographed a lot. A big trip was 2018 to Cody. We did a big Wyoming tour, and so we stopped at the Buffalo Bill Center. There's lots of great Western art there. Those are Frederick Remington's behind us. We went and we stayed at Old Faithful, and then we went to some of the sites in Yellowstone. That's where they got the Goofy Artist Point sign. And we actually sat and did a little painting. Thomas Moran, very famous American artist, and one of the people responsible for Yellowstone National Park. He was on the Hayden expedition with the photographer whose name escapes me right now. And they depicted Yellowstone for people back east, and that's how it got set aside as a national park when they saw how beautiful it was. So yeah, seeing some Thomas Moran work there. And then we took we went through Yellowstone and then ended up over in Idaho, in Driggs. And this is a CSC alum, Scott Christensen. And we had contacted him to see if we could tour his studio. And he wasn't there. He travels a lot giving workshops and, all over the place. But his assistant, who's there on the far right there, she let us in and showed us his studio and kind of talked about how he works and the shipping and all of that. So that was a really great experience for all of us. And then in Jackson, there's all kinds of galleries in Jackson, art galleries. The National Wildlife Museum of Art is a really wonderful place to go. And so we saw work there. And I got to see one of my favorite artists, Carl Rungus. And he was an early painter in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and just these beautiful wilderness, wildlife kinds of work there, and great brush strokes. Went back to Denver again, and the Museum of Contemporary Art in Denver is another museum there that's got really fantastic stuff. The Clifford Still Museum is kind of new. He started out doing realistic work like most artists do. He was from, I think, the Washington State area. And I couldn't figure out how he ended up in Denver with a museum, but I think what I read was he wanted some city to take his work, and Denver was willing to do that and build a museum for him. So, and these big, huge, beautiful abstract paintings. There's another Claus Oldenburg. So again, if you start to recognize these household regular objects that are really huge, that's probably a Claus Oldenburg. So that's the one in front of the Denver. And then there's Meow Wolf. So that's a kind of a more recent thing. These are really experiential, interactive art things that you walk into, and they started in Santa Fe. There was a group of kind of punk artists in 2008 who wanted to make an art and music venue, and so they create these worlds that you walk through and interact with, and so that's Meow Wolf started there in Santa Fe, but this is the one in Denver called Convergence Station. And there's usually a story, some story. The bottom part of this is this dystopian world, and then you go up into this kind of psychedelic area. And so that's become a big favorite of students to go see. This is Spring 23, back to Santa Fe. Georgia O'Keeffe, got to see her dress that time, so that was pretty cool. They had like an exhibit of her clothes and her paints and tools. This is the New Mexico Museum of Art, where that one Robert Henry was, and we got a tour down in the basement and to see their storage and kind of how museum processes work. Brooks Hafey, our music professor, was my second driver there, so that enables us to take more people. And this is Meow Wolf in Santa Fe and the House of Eternal Return. So you can like climb into washers, you can open refrigerators and go into this other parallel universe. And there's supposed to be a video here. Let me see if I can. This is Brooks playing the dinosaur bones in Meow Wolf. So yeah, Meow Wolf's got all kinds of fun, strange psychedelic things. So went back to Utah in 24 again, and I leaned on my two friends, Karen and Alyssa, who are working for the Utah Arts Council, and they took us Salt Lake. Utah has a great program where they collected art. The state actually collected art through the years, and this is where some of that collection resides. The grade schools had art that they collected, and so they showed us this. And Salt Lake had an earthquake in 2020, it was a substantial one. And Karen had to go in. There was some things that had fell down in this storage room, but she said nothing got damaged. So they were pretty excited about that. Back to the Utah Museum of Fine Art again, and they had an interesting interactive art piece going on where they had opera singers kind of just walking around, and then they would come up to you and ask, would you like a song? And they did that to me, and you sit there and they sang to you. So here's two of our students with this experience. So yeah, again, another different way of doing art, seeing art, being and feeling art with that. Oops. Get through. We went to the Utah Museum of Contemporary Art, and they had a huge exhibit on the Great Salt Lake, and that's part of that spiral jetty idea. And the Salt Lake is kind of in trouble. It's been in a 20-year decline. It was at its lowest level in 2022. And we went back to the jetty, and I'll show you a comparison between the earlier trip and this one. So this is 2024. It's the largest salt body water in the Western Hemisphere. At one point, it was as large as Rhode Island, and today more than half of the lake is gone. 800 square miles of the lake bed's exposed. And the problem with that is the dust that blows, usually western wind, it's got arsenic and heavy metals in it. And so it blows right into the metropolitan area of Salt Lake, all those areas there along the Wasatch Front. So they're facing some big problems. And you can see, oh, there's a video. There's us walking on it. And so you saw those other pictures. You can see it from the air. It's that big. And when you're walking on it, you just see those, the rocks there. And that was us in the middle there on the right when we do the whole thing. So this is 2015, and then this is 2024. So at some point, it's going to be covered with sand. You probably won't see it. And hopefully the Salt Lake doesn't disappear. So the interesting, again, it's Robert Smithson's and the whole land art idea of the change over time of the environment. There's another image. So in 2015, lots more rocks were visible, and now it's much less. So, and then last year, 2025, Mackenzie's gone. So they learned how to maybe fly somewhere. All those other trips we drove. And for the first time in 25, we flew. And I was really nervous about that because I haven't flown much and it's all new to me, and now I've got students. But it went really great. We had a wonderful time. Pike Street Market is a place where everybody goes. They throw fish and they yell, and then there's this thing called the gum wall. So down below Pike Street, you go through this little tunnel, and there's this gum wall, and everybody puts their gum there. So that's another site for Seattle. The Dale Chihuly Garden and Glass Museum is there, and Dale Chihuly's the internationally famous glass-blowing artist. Amazing, beautiful work. You walk through all this, and then you can go outside. The Space Needle is right above this, this glass museum. The Museum of Pop Culture, and then there's that Frank Gehry building, famous architect, another famous architect that creates buildings that aren't shaped like rectangles. Inside are all these pieces from pop culture, and I'm not remembering what they're really interested in there. Maybe somebody, a young person, knows here. I can't remember what that was. Anybody know what that is that they're photographing?
It's a halo.
Halo from a video game, right? Yeah, okay, yeah. I was more interested in
It has kitty ears on it. So yeah.
Okay. I was more interested in the guitars. They had Jimi Hendrix guitars. They had Stevie Ray Vaughan's. Yeah, all kinds of guitars, famous people's guitars. So that was really neat. And the Seattle Art Museum, world class, another world class museum. And they're looking at Greek vases there. And we saw Alexander Calder mobiles. We talk about Alexander Calder in our classes. They also had an Ai Weiwei exhibit, and he's a very contemporary artist. He does really interesting exhibits, and also trying to talk about Chinese government and the human rights issues. So that was really great that we got to see that while it was there. And then our latest trip, this last week, we just got back. And we flew again, and it went well. We went to Las Vegas, and this is Seven Magic Mountains. It's another kind of land art installation. Apparently, it was supposed to be temporary, and it's so popular that I think they're going to keep it there for a while. It's like 20 miles west of the Las Vegas Strip. And if you are on I-15 and you leave Vegas and you're headed to California, you're going to go right by it and you can't miss it. You know, it just stands out in that bleak desert. So that was really interesting and fun. And lots of selfies were taken, as they are. Again, I always try and find an area outside that we can learn about the environment and feel what it's like. And so Red Rock Canyon Conservation Area is right near Vegas. You need to get a reservation to go in. But we got to hike around a little bit on the rocks and had a picnic of leftover pizza, so that worked out good. We went to Hoover Dam that day too, and one of the students, it was kind of interesting, I pointed out it's Art Deco. It was built during 1931 to 1936, like Edna and Kreitz. That's a little game I play in my Intro to Graphic Design class. They have to find the 2 Art Deco buildings on campus. And there's architectural details that just, you know, shout Art Deco if you know what you're looking for. And so the dam has Art Deco details, which is really fascinating. But yeah, so that was fun. And they had heard somewhere that if you throw water off that side of the dam where it goes down a long ways, it comes right back at you. And sure enough, they did it, and it did. So yeah, they were squirting their water bottles, and it was flying back up at them. So yeah, science. Had to go to Meow Wolf again. There's one in Vegas, and Meow Wolf, the name came up, they came up with the name by those early punk artists just threw a bunch of words into a hat and they picked out 2 and that's how they named it. So this one is called Omega Mart and it's kind of like surreal Walmart, which I was really thinking that would be kind of cool, and it was. So they have, you know, it looks like a grocery store, but all these things are spoof products. Like, you know, they have, and they're kind of satirical. What was it, the detergent? It was, you know, I can't think of it now, but really funny stuff. And you can buy that stuff. Angel went behind the meat market there and she's trying to sell Amanda something. And yeah, they have hot sauce and then you go back behind, you know, you can go open the cooler and you walk through and then you come into this other parallel universe in the back, and there's some story about corporate conspiracy and they're trying to poison us, and you can go through and find all the clues or something. So, but they were very excited to go to Meow Wolf, Omega Mart. It's in a big warehouse called Area 15 as opposed to Area 51. And inside that, it's like this big shopping center with black light and like things flashing and music and yeah, overstimulation. Lots, and yeah, it was fun. We went to the Atomic Museum, which I was really surprisingly interested, as was a couple of them. Amanda in the green there. So we had a tour guide named David, and he flew Huey helicopters for cleaning up in the Marshall Islands after the nuclear tests there. And he was telling us about that. And we get a little further down, and Amanda turns to me. Amanda went to Chadron High. And she turns to me and she said, you know, when I was in grade school, we had students from the Marshall Islands that I went to school with. So that was really cool to hear that and for her to make that connection and then see what, you know, that was. Radioactivity, Geiger counter, that was fun to play with. And then they had an exhibit which was really smart, based on a video game called Fallout that I didn't know about, of course, but they all knew. They had artifacts from the video game, and they were taking all kinds of pictures, and then there's that there. But it's smartly based on, you know, this real time, and it's kind of this retro 50s, atomic age stuff, and it sounds, I might actually try a video game. It sounds kind of interesting. So that was neat that they got to see that. We also went to an art museum on the UNLV campus, and they had a really beautiful show about art and ecology and that connection. And they actually had beans growing. You could draw things with beans. And those blue fabric paintings, a woman's father had died and he loved the ocean, and she used his ashes to make these pieces of art. So a lot of, just beautiful, interesting things. The UNL campus is really interesting. It's like right in the middle of Vegas, and there's planes flying over every 5 minutes. And so yeah, it was an interesting thing to see. And then one of my favorites was the Neon Museum. So there's a museum in Vegas. It's a boneyard for all the old Las Vegas casino signs, and you go at night and a lot of them light up and they move. And we did a historical tour and they told us about where these signs, the history of these casinos and the growth of Vegas, and how at one point Vegas thought it needed to be family oriented, and that's where Treasure Island came from, and they had the pirates, but they realized the parents were taking care of the kids and not, spending gambling money. So now it's back to, kind of adult entertainment stuff. So, but yeah, really beautiful, fascinating stuff there. And the Bellagio Hotel and Casino on the Las Vegas Strip, if you go in the lobby, it has an entire ceiling of Dale Chihuly glass. So that was our art trip there on the Las Vegas Strip. He's the guy from Seattle that we also saw. And yeah, that beautiful glass there. So that's pretty much why I do trips with students, because of all the real life stuff they see, and those, I hope it lasts for a lifetime, those memories. And we went back on that Salt Lake trip, and I got out and made them take a picture in front of that sign, and they changed the sign on me. And I didn't realize Artemis wasn't that the mission that just went around the moon? So I thought, wow, very cool. So that's great. Thank you. If anybody's got questions, I'm happy to, yeah. Yes.
You mentioned that the state of Utah has its own permanent collection. Is that common for other states?
I don't think so, because I don't think Nebraska, I mean, there's the Nebraska Museum of Art, but I don't think that's, in, where is it? I don't think that's state collected, so yeah. Yeah, that's a really great thing. We have public art that the state, yeah.
I gotta ask you, what's your favorite mall place that you take the students? Most inspirational for them?
Most inspirational for them, or?
Yeah, favorite for you too, I guess.
Wow. I don't know. I guess for me, Utah, because it's kind of like home ground. And Tina, what do you think?
I figured you'd say Utah.
Yeah. You went on a couple trips.
Well, both of them were Utah.
You got to Santa Fe. Yeah. So, to see in the country, I think, and yeah, that's.
But my daughter loved the pictures I took from Utah so much that when she graduated, that's where she wanted to go for graduation. So your class inspired her as well.
Okay, good.
I got it.
Yes.
Other than the 5 places in Iowa, what restaurant or travels would you recommend to other people here?
Restaurant? Oh man. I don't know. The pie pizza in Salt Lake City.
Yeah,
is
that
good.
pie pizza,
Yeah.
underground basement pizza.
Yeah, that's
Phenomenal.
yeah.
When they bring the pizza out the side of your table, yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to recommend that. So.
And live band.
And what?
They had that live band too.
Yes, yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Oh, Daniel.
I just wanted to ask, how do you balance finding out trips, things like would you fly or drive?
Oh, how do I balance, decide between flying or driving? if it's less than 14 hours, I can, drive it, but longer than that. The biggest issue is we just can't take that much time off from school. So the students don't really want to take that much time off. I'd be happy to go for, a week or more, and that Utah or the Wyoming trip we did the week school got out, so that allowed us to do a longer drive trip, but yeah. Anything else? Well, thank you so much for coming out tonight. I know there was lots going on this week, so.